Hello everyone, this is Powell Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about a massive storm brewing with a major snowstorm and possible blizzard, as well as severe weather over the next 7 days. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. We got a lot to cover this morning. This is Wednesday, October the 6th. And let's start off with the water vapor imagery. What we're looking at here is an upper level low that's spinning in the midsection of the country, and you can see these orange banding breaking out in the afternoons. That's a lot of sun, but it's going to have that clash, and where that clash uplifts the Gulf moisture, we could be looking at a pretty good major flood threat in parts of the Florida Panhandle into the southeast today, with some very heavy rain, and at times they're already under a flash flood watch. Probably flash flood warnings, if not possible, even some flood emergencies at time, with these convective banding really setting up in the daytime heating. We've got all that instability out here in the Caribbean, as we've got a lot of heavier rains moving into the Caribbean and Jamaica, as well as the Cayman Islands, as we have a lot of tropical moisture down there. So today, in fact, the Weather Prediction Center has highlighted 2 moderate risk zones for those flash flood potential into the Florida Panhandle here, as that convective banding really starts to set up. And there's another zone here into northern Alabama, northern Georgia here, as well as parts of South Carolina and southern Tennessee, where we could be looking at some very heavy rain over the next 24 hours. With this flood threat on the table. As we zoom through over the next 24 hours, as far as the rain goes for the U.S., all the action is into the southeast today, with that very heavy rain setting up over the Panhandle into Alabama, into Georgia, into the Carolinas, as well as North Carolina, especially into Tennessee, but also areas of Missouri, into Illinois, Indiana as well, as we just kind of have like sporadic showers out here into the northwest areas. So as we kind of zoom into some of the totals we could be looking at today, and like I mentioned, easily 2 to 4, if not 4 to 6, but there's some areas with that convective banding that's definitely set it up in some of the high resolution models of 6 to 10 inches of rain is not out of the question in some isolated spots into the Florida Panhandle, and especially as you get here up here in northern Georgia here, as well as Alabama. So there's definitely areas, there's pockets here that I'm definitely concerned that we could be looking at some serious flooding threat as we get deeper into the day, with those 2 to 3 inch per hour rainfall potential coming up later on this afternoon. So, and that just goes into tomorrow. So it's not quite as severe as today, but yes, you still could be looking at some very heavy rain in a lot of the same areas that are going to be impacted today on Thursday, October the 7th here, as that very heavy rain just will continue to lift further north, as that deep tropical moisture feed will just keep funneling the precipitation in that area and dump some very heavy rain with the daytime heating. So that is definitely a concern. But if we take a look at the tropics, I've been highlighting that October 6th time frame. We have a lot of upward motion air into the tropics. You can see this feed of conveyor belt of moisture funneling into the Caribbean, into Jamaica, into the Cayman Islands. This will go into the Yucatan. We've got another slug back out here. So for over the next 7 days, I just think this continues into the Caribbean with this conveyor belt of moisture. So, but as far as like anything tropical trying to develop out of that region, it's probably going to have a hard time. You got to have all the dynamics come together for tropical systems. And yeah, we have a lot of upward motion air. We've got a lot of deep ocean content waters. We've got very warm waters in the Caribbean, but we have a lot of shear, and shear is the death of tropical systems. And you can definitely see in all these red shaded areas is unfavorable. So as systems come across, they just can't get some sort of low level center. And now it doesn't take away the rain. You still get all that, but you're not going to probably get an organized area of low pressure with the wind going to be as an impact. So it's going to be just the very heavy rain. Now, this may actually change over the next week, but as far as right now, things don't look very favorable into the Caribbean as far as like an organized tropical system. And you can see all the red in the Gulf of Mexico, and also red into the Bahamas. I mean, the National Weather Service is monitoring an area of low pressure off here that gives it a 10% chance, but it's just fighting all that shear right now. So it's just definitely fighting all that shear. Now, that again, that does not take away all the deep tropical moisture feed that you're going to be impacting over the Caribbean over the next 7 days. So I'm still looking at some very heavy rain in those areas. So if we take a look at the overall North American view is for the 500 millibar, as we get into Friday, October the 8th, you can see what's really happening. We've got 2 areas to watch. We have a deep ridge over the southeast Canada that's bringing actually very warm, unseasonably like conditions, if not almost record temperatures by the time we get into Friday and Saturday timeframe, as we have a deep trough that's continuing to pump colder and cooler air out here in the western regions. And this right here is the main player as we get into next week with some very cold air that's going to dump some very heavy snow, if not blizzard, and bring all the severe weather that's on the table for parts of the country. But yeah, as we get into that Friday time frame, there's your high temperatures. That is unseasonably warm, well into the 90s in much of Texas and Oklahoma and into Kansas, with some very warm conditions, if not near record conditions. As you get into Saturday and Sunday time frame in the central and eastern 2/3 of the country, all the cold air is bottled up and off the west. Not very cold currently as we get into Friday, but it really gets cold as we get into Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week. And so because all that action let's take a look at the overall teleconnections well to the north and why all this is playing out. So here is the PNA, which is your Pacific North American. So whenever it's basically negative, that brings all the cold air well off into the west coast. And then you have your EPO, which is your Eastern Pacific Oscillation. And you can actually see that's all well positive. So that's just the completely flip side of the pattern. You got all the warm, unseasonably warm air into the central and eastern 2/3 of the country, and then all the very cold air off into the western parts of the country. And that's what we're going to see at least for the first half of October. And that's our concern, with some very cold air and then also a severe threat. And that severe threat actually starts on Sunday night as we have a low level center that's going to be developing over the plains. Look at the vorticity index. As it taps into that warm sector, it's got a little bit of cold air behind it, but not much. But that's enough to create the instability up in the upper levels that you could be looking at some severe weather. October is typically our second severe weather season, and that's possibly going to be on the table as we get into Sunday with that clash in temperatures of these well above average seasonal anomaly averages well to the central and eastern 2/3. And then we got these, below normal conditions out here in the west, and that'll kick off the heavier rains and strong to severe thunderstorms. In fact, of course, this is 5 days out, but on Sunday, the Storm Prediction Center has already highlighted a slight risk for severe weather into the plains and parts of Oklahoma City, into Tulsa, get into Plano, into Garland, into Carrollton areas. That could be kicking off some round of some severe weather with large hail, some damaging winds, and an isolated tornado threat is definitely not out of the question. And that's just the first round, and we have another round coming in early next week. So now let's take a look at that, because as we get into that Monday timeframe, October the 11th, that's when things get really interesting with this thing is going to be a beast coming off the west coast with this massively trough coming in off the west, bringing some very cold air, definitely the coldest air of the season. That's going to bring rain, snow, blizzard, and severe weather for parts of the west, and eventually getting into the central U.S. So underneath that, snow is going to fly as we get into Monday afternoon into Idaho, into Montana, and parts of Wyoming here, as well as northern Utah. With that cold air just continuing to penetrate further off the west coast, and that will just continue to lift further off into the south. But as we wake up on the day on that Monday morning, yeah, we could be looking at some chilly conditions, if not into the teens and into the low teens in parts of Canada and Western Canada here. But all the reds here are your freezing temperatures for much of Washington and Oregon and Idaho and Montana, getting into Wyoming here as well as Colorado. But look at all the way out to the central U.S. That's where your widespread 70s. These are low temperatures. So look at the contrast. And that's why we're talking about that severe weather that's going to be on the table. But definitely as we get into that Tuesday timeframe, October the 12th, I mean, look at the purple. That is a deep trough digging in with some very cold air going to be tapping into that warm sector. That's going to kick off our very heavy snow event, and if not blizzard conditions, as these isobars really tighten up. And so let's get into the details on that is with the temperatures as we go into Tuesday morning. All that red's filtering in, and even well to the north in Western Canada. Look at that. I mean, this color right here, that is actually below zero conditions popping up in single digits in parts of Western Canada. So it's got some colder air to contend with, if not an Arctic blast will be coming in for much of the western parts of the country. But look at the warm sector. I mean, we're talking mid 70s in Dallas, where we're talking below freezing temperatures for much of the west. That's the contrast in the plains that we're talking about that's going to bring around a severe weather as we get into possibly that Tuesday time frame. But to the north, we're going to have to be dealing with some very heavy snow that's going to be breaking out into Montana, into Wyoming, into Utah. As this low pressure really starts to deepen, and this part of the country, as that colder air continues to drain. I mean, look at that 1035, Arctic high pressure here to the north of Western Canada. That's definitely going to bring some cold air with it, well from the Arctic. And as we get into that Tuesday night time frame, that's when things get really interesting with this deeply inverted trough digging in. This goes negative tilt. And whenever that happens, you could have that split in the atmosphere and talking about a possibly severe weather outbreak into the plains, getting into Kansas and Oklahoma and in parts of Texas where they're tapping into that warm sector, and back behind it, they got all that snow and heavy snow to contend with off to the west. So as we get into that Tuesday night time frame, yeah, this is very rare for the Storm Prediction Center to already highlight a slight risk for severe weather all the way out until Tuesday, October the 12th. But that's the confidence that's on the table with this definitely deeply inverted trough. Right now it's a slight risk, but man, this could easily pop up to an enhanced, if not almost a moderate risk by the time we get too closer to this potential event that's on the table. So as we get in that Tuesday time frame, you definitely have to be looking out for some severe weather into Fort Worth, into Oklahoma City, into Tulsa, getting into Wichita, Kansas. So obviously we can fine tune this as it gets closer, but definitely severe weather is going to be on the table with those record high temperatures out ahead of it, and that very cold air making that clash in October is known for your big swings in temperatures, and that is definitely going to be on the table. I mean, look where we're at on Wednesday morning. I mean, we're still deeply entrenched in the mid 70s with all that severe weather we have to contend with. Those high dew points, higher temperatures. We've got the cold air aloft. That's where we could be getting some of that hail, some of the rotation in the upper levels with some tornadoes and some very high winds too, with these isobars really tightening up. But some very cold air they're going to have to be dealing with for much of the western regions, into even in down to Arizona now, getting into New Mexico with some freezing temperatures, especially in the higher elevations, is not out of the question. You're probably going to be freezing from just west of Denver, and then all up in the higher mountains there in Colorado, and then especially as we get into Wyoming here with the very heavy snow and a pretty good snowpack that's going to be on the ground by then. But yeah, as we get in that Wednesday time frame, look what's happening. We've got all the very heavy snow that's happening in Montana, into Colorado. We even have a tropical storm down here into eastern Pacific. We've got all the severe weather to contend with to the north, and we've got all these possibly record high temperatures to the east. So there's a lot going on as we get into next week. And the wind is definitely going to be a factor as you get through deeper into next week, especially that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe with that deeply inverted trough digging in. All these oranges and reds, easily 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. So if you got travel plans next week, especially the truck drivers, definitely be on the lookout from this system because there's going to be a lot of wind to contend with for a good chunk of the country with snowstorms, severe weather, and very heavy winds setting up for parts of Arizona into New Mexico, into Colorado, into Wyoming, and that'll just filter into parts of Kansas and into Nebraska as well. So as this continues, which tries to push a little bit further off into the east as we get deeper into next week. But there's the rain setup for the next 7 days. We've got the western coastal regions picking up all the heavy rain. Unfortunately, it starts to die down as you get further into central and eastern parts of Washington and Oregon. We still got some rain penetrated into California, so anything we can get is welcome for sure. And there's all the rain prospects, and a lot of this will form into of snow into much of Utah, into Colorado, Wyoming, into Montana. And there we finally get back into the rain in parts of Oklahoma and Texas. Dry for now, but a lot of this rain is going to be Sunday night, and then picking back up again on Tuesday and Wednesday, because this actually goes through Wednesday, October 13th, for the next 7 days. And there's the heavier rains into parts of the southeast. All the heavier rains, it's going to be coming into the Caribbean and Jamaica and to the Cayman Islands as well, with that very deep tropical moisture that's going to be impacting you guys as well. So, and then up here into the Ohio Valley, we're going to be kind of caught in the middle, but still some rain picking up into Illinois, into Indiana, and as well as Ohio and parts of the Mid-Atlantic as well. There's your snow breaking out for the next 7 days. And on the European model, again, some of these areas could be pretty bullish, packing up at least a foot, if not more than that. Some isolated spots could easily pick up 2 feet underneath this potential blizzard that's going to be on the table. And even the GFS model is even more bullish. So this is definitely a big event as we get into next week in parts of Montana and to Wyoming, with some very heavy snow breaking out, if not blizzard conditions at time, with those very high winds. So I know there's a lot to go over this morning. I appreciate you guys watching. Do give this video a thumbs up, like, to let YouTube know that you value my content. I appreciate you guys watching. Definitely hit the subscribe button to catch the latest update and notification bell. And I'll see you in the next video where I protect you before and after the storm.